Breaking news, ladies. The Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program, Class of 2022, starts in January. If you are a women's health professional with an existing practice and you've struggled to incorporate fertility awareness charting into your client work, this is the program you've been waiting for. There's nothing like it offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. We start the first week of January. Apply now at fertilityfriday.com/FAMM live. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 393. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Today I'm sharing another brand new episode in my FAMM Practitioner series. In today's episode, I'm interviewing Nora DeBora. She is a preconception health coach and holistic nutritionist who helps women prepare for pregnancy and have a healthy baby after 30. Through her signature program, Master Your Cycle to Get Pregnant, she teaches women how to optimize their hormones and fertility by harnessing the power of their menstrual cycle with nutrition, cycle charting, and self-care practices. And in today's episode, we really take a deep dive into Nora's personal experience in the program. So for those of you who've been listening to the FAMM Practitioner series so far, you will have likely gathered that a big part of the program for the practitioner is also to participate and to chart their own cycles and see what they can glean through this process. So essentially going through the process that I'm teaching you to take your clients through. And so this is a really interesting episode to learn about some of the insights that Nora was able to draw from her cycle, and also to learn a little bit more about how Nora is going to apply what she learned in this program with her clients. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. And I'm excited to be here with Nora DeBora. And as we just said, it rhymes, which is amazing. But Nora is one of the members of my Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship program. And we're actually recording this on the day before our very last official call, which is fun. So we have been together for the last 6 to 7 months. And basically you've gone through the bulk of the program at this point. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, you said this is exciting. It's the second last day of the program. I said, it's a tear. I'm sad. I'm going to miss you guys. It's been such an amazing experience so far, but thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, of course. And I'm still thrilled that we still have, even though officially it's our last day, we still have calls. So it's actually not actually over yet. So I'm excited about that too.
Yes.
But I'd love just to start by, one of the questions I love asking on this show, and I pretty much ask all of my kind of reality series guests, is if you could share with us a little bit about your story. So, when you had your first period and how you managed your fertility, if you used hormonal contraceptives, and essentially what led you to jump into this practitioner program. And also, while you're kind of sharing your story, also tell us a little bit more about what you do and what kind of led you to do the work that you do professionally.
Absolutely. So I'll do my best to keep the story nice and short, but yes, no, I'll give you the key points. So I'll start kind of personally with myself. So we'll start maybe just with my personal period journey. I don't remember the exact year, but I'm pretty sure I got my period. Well, actually, I know I got my period in grade 8. So it was at 12 or 13 years old, one of those ages. But I got my period in grade 8. I remember I was at my cottage. My parents were split at the time. It was just my dad and my brothers. And I think I had a girlfriend with me. And I remember being like, I got my period. Oh my goodness, what do I do? And so, yeah, when I first got my period, it just happened. And then literally from that point on forward, I had a regular cycle. I mean, from the best of what I can remember in my early teens, I had a fairly regular cycle. And I did end up going on the birth control pill, I think, as a lot of women can attest to, when I was 15 and a half or 16 years old, but not for any irregular cycle problems, more for contraceptives. And I decided to go on the birth control pill. It was like the thing to do. That's just what all the girls did. It was like, did you go to the clinic? Did you get your pill? What pill are you on? Everybody's comparing the pills. And then I was on the birth control pill for about, I would say, 8 years of my life. And interestingly enough, when I went on the pill, I didn't realize this until I went off the pill, but I'm an extremely active individual. I grew up competitive dancing. I've always been extremely lean, but when I went on the pill, naturally my boobs, like I have like bigger naturally breasts anyways, but they just exploded when I went on the pill. I gained some weight and I also had very heavy, crampy periods, which I think is like backwards to what typically happens to most people where their periods get really light. It ended up going the other way for me. I had extreme cramps, which I thought was normal because I was still young and had cramps and extremely heavy periods. And so it wasn't until I went off the period that I let my cycle kind of naturally come back and realize, oh, my period's not typically this heavy and I don't typically have a lot of cramps. And then I also dropped a bunch of weight and leaned out a little bit more. So that was a really, really interesting observation to see about how my body changed with the pill. And then from there, I would say I wasn't on any hormonal contraceptive for a few years. I let my body just do its natural thing. Again, regular healthy cycles to my knowledge. And then in my late 20s, I went on the IUD. I did the Mirena. So I had that low dose of progesterone and had the Mirena for 5 years. Interestingly enough, when I did get the IUD and I went in for my 6-month checkup, they couldn't find the string. So I had to go back a bunch of times. They had to do an in-depth ultrasound to find the string. They couldn't find the string. I ended up just leaving it because they said the IUD was still in there. There was not an issue. And it wasn't until the time that I actually had to get it taken out that I had to go in for a couple times. And finally, a practitioner fished for the string, grabbed it, and pulled it out. And then since then, I've had no hormonal contraceptives, and I've just been managing, I guess, it all just on my own with my own methods of birth control, or without the hormones. So that's kind of like my personal birth control story. It's pretty maybe standard and simple, I would say.
Well,
but
before you go on, I always like have all these questions.
Dig. I love it.
So I'm just curious. So as you may know, I've done quite a few interviews of women who've used IUDs. And honestly, when I started the series, I wasn't making a point of asking about insertion and removal in terms of if there was any pain, but then it became quite clear quite early on that a lot of women experience that. So what was your experience of insertion and the removal? It was obviously a bit challenging because they had to find the string. So what was that like?
Mm-hmm. I was definitely nervous because I didn't know, I know that they're putting this little thing inside me. I do remember the insertion. The insertion was uncomfortable. I think, it wasn't excruciatingly painful, but I do remember it being uncomfortable. I do remember seeing like blood, and I had bled a little bit. I had went to one of the kind of women's health clinics in the city here in Toronto. And yeah, they tell you to take a couple Advils, and then they give you something to put up so that you don't get an infection. But the insertion I remember was painful. And actually, Lisa, now that you say this, it's jogging my memory. I remember for the first couple of months that I had the IUD in me, as I had said, I'm extremely active. I practice yoga. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm a personal trainer. And like movement is my medicine. And the one thing that I remember about the IUD at the beginning, the most uncomfortable part about it was when I was in yoga, especially doing twists, deep twists, I would feel it. I would just feel this like uncomfortable sensation, or like, ooh, I can't go that far, or like, ooh, there's like a little twinge. And then I remember thinking like, is that the IUD? And so I just kind of left it. And eventually after 6 to 8 months, that kind of subsided, but I definitely felt it for the first few months of it being in there. So it was slightly disruptive. It wasn't like all consuming disruptive, but I mostly noticed it when I was practicing yoga and doing a lot of kind of that type of, those types of exercises.
Well, and it sounds like it was a generally positive experience. So did it disrupt your bleeding patterns, or was it pretty like even keel?
Yeah, great question. And then I'll tell you about the removal. So actually, when I got the IUD, my period almost went away, which kind of terrified me because I was like, well, what's actually happening to me? You know, as I don't hate my period. I've always kind of befriended my period. And, you know, as you say, it's your fifth vital sign. And, you know, I kind of just intuitively kind of felt that way throughout my whole life. But I would say when I got the IUD, within a couple of months, my periods became very, very light and scant. Like I would know that my period was there because I would have to wear like a light tampon 1 or 2 days, and the rest it would be panty liner. Otherwise, it would just be pretty much non-existent.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then you were going to tell us about the removal.
Yeah. So the removal, I was nervous because, again, I had gone back, and I think it was when I was getting an in-depth PAP at a time, and she had gone in. I said, "Can you see the string? There should be a string there. Do you see it?" She's like, "No, I don't." And so I think I had to come back 1 or 2 times, and then I had to get a couple different doctors to come in and try and find the string. But there was one doctor who used a little contraption. She found it and pulled it out. And she's like, "Okay, we're done." And then I was like, "Wait, what?" I didn't feel anything. So the removal was actually quite painless and simple. The insertion was definitely more painful. I think I just had more anxiety and nerves about the removal because I was like, well, they're like, well, if you don't see the string, there's an opportunity that the IUD maybe gets into your abdomen. And I was like, wait, what? So have you heard about that?
Well, ironically, as we're recording this, I think within a couple of weeks, maybe within a few weeks of this episode, I'm releasing a Pill Reality series episode where that exact thing happened. And so, ironically, I did recently interview a woman who had that experience and shared it on the podcast and needed to have it surgically removed. And it wasn't a positive thing, obviously, for her. But yeah, so I think that it's helpful though to kind of share the gamut and the variety of different experiences. So although there was some complications with your experience, it wasn't overly negative, although you're not the first person who I've heard say that they could feel it, which is interesting. I think it was similar in the episode that I recorded that I was mentioning, where she had brought it to the doctor's attention and the doctor was like, "No, that's impossible," which obviously it is not impossible. One other thing that I just wanted to point out, because I've had a few of the series episodes, but not a huge amount where women have experienced weight gain. I remember when I was on the pill in high school, I remember knowing that that was one of the side effects, that your boobs would get bigger. And I was kind of hoping that would happen. I took it. And mine did get a little bigger, but they were like extremely sore all the time, like the entire time, the years that I was on the pill, they were bigger slightly. I'm not like giant boob lady over here, like a good strong like B.5. I think since children I've become like a strong C.
But
it was like a trade-off. Like they were a little bit bigger, like strong B, but they were very sore all the time. And I remember when I came off the pill, that was one of the like major reliefs. Like, oh my goodness, they're not sore all the time. Kind of reminiscent of pre-puberty, when you get your breast buds and they're sore all the time. It was like that.
Yeah, I don't remember experiencing, I've never really had sore breasts. Like even now that I'm not on any hormonal contraceptives, and I'm a double D. So I've got broad shoulders. I have a pretty broad frame, but I would say even now, like I very rarely get sore breasts. But the one thing that it's funny because now that I think back about this, I used to work at a sick kids hospital in HR before I shifted and decided to focus my career in health and wellness. And I remember always as a midday break, I would go down to the Starbucks and I would get myself some sort of decaf or potentially even caffeinated. And I'm excited to talk about my caffeine experience, Lisa, because there's a big light bulb moment that went on for me in our program, but we'll save that for a little bit after. But what I do remember being on the pill is I would go down to the Starbucks, even if it was just like a non-caffeinated beverage, I would always get it. This was before I went to holistic nutrition school, but I would always get it with soy milk. And I remember every single time I would take 3 or 4 sips of that drink and my cramps would go nuts. And so I don't know if it was the soy with like the excess estrogen, or if it was like a caffeinated drink. And I would just remember, like, if I had my period that day, I would just like it would be like a trigger to like bleed profusely, which was bizarre. Or maybe it's not necessarily bizarre, but it was just interesting to see how my body was responding to certain nutrients from also being on the birth control pill. And when certain combinations of ingredients came together, how it affected my body. So that was something that I always remember: caffeine and or soy, birth control pill, period. And it would just gush like crazy.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think that we really underestimate how much of the phytoestrogens, the plant estrogens, are in the soy products. So
yeah,
I didn't have that experience of increased, maybe I wouldn't even notice. My pain was pretty bad in my early 20s with my periods and stuff like that. But when I gave up dairy for a while because I was having some digestive issues with regular dairy, and I transitioned to soy. And as soon as I did that, my cycles would go to like 45 days very consistently. So then I would have to, like, I figured it out because I was charting, and then I came off the soy, and then I was like, oh, so when I drink soy, I've got these super long cycles. So that was my experience with soy, in case anyone's curious, or if anyone who's listening has had a similar soy experience. Well, so all of these interesting things then were happening, throughout your life. And so tell us a little bit about then how you transitioned into the work that you're doing now.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I started off with, I did my undergrad in psych, my postgrad in HR, and then worked at a pediatric hospital in the city here for about 6-7 years. And in my mid to late 20s, something was just ticking inside of me. And I was like, this corporate environment is just not for me. And, I've always been super healthy. I would come to work with my green smoothies. I remember one of my colleagues would be like, Nora, I bet you if I cut you open, you would bleed green. Like, that's because I was just like, always have my green smoothies and my greens, or like everybody would just always come to me with health questions. And so there was kind of like this crossroads point for me. I was studying to go actually and write my GMAT to potentially go back to school for an MBA. And it was my late 20s. I was in a really kind of just confusing time in my life, coming out of a toxic relationship. And I needed some sort of outlet of stress reliever. So I ended up just randomly going to take a yoga class. And as soon as I got on that yoga mat, it was literally the catalyst that changed the direction of my whole life, which is really cool now to look back and see. And I had decided from that point forward not to pursue my master's in business school. I ended up 6 months later doing my yoga teacher training. And then from there, I learned about the Eastern philosophy of medicine called Ayurveda. I did like a 200-hour Ayurveda practitioner course. From there, I learned about holistic nutrition. And then I went back to school for holistic nutrition, which brought me into my early 30s. And then at that point, I left sick kids, the hospital, and then started my own practice in nutrition. I was teaching yoga. I did some personal training on the side. And that was in my early 30s. And as I started to move into my mid 30s, I've always desired to be a mom and want to have a family of my own. I grew up with 4 brothers, lots of kids running around, and I always have wanted kids of my own. And as I approached my mid 30s, I realized, well, I'm still single, or I'm dating, and there's nobody serious here. So I'm probably not going to have kids relatively soon, and it's probably going to be a little bit later in life for me. So, I was like, let me step up my health game and do what I need to do to optimize my fertility, because I've always generally been healthy, but prior to that, I didn't place an emphasis or a focus on specifically fertility. And so just a couple years ago, that's when I had decided to niche into the preconception space. And so now I call myself a preconception health coach specializing in holistic nutrition. And then from there, obviously came across your podcast a few years ago, fell in love, and then followed you. And then when I saw that you were doing this FAMM, because before you, I wasn't into charting my cycle. Because again, like, I had a regular period. I just thought, well, I was tracking my cycle, knowing I was getting my period every 27 to 30 days. Generally speaking, other than my terrible PMS, which we'll probably dive into soon, I didn't really have any painful periods or any other major issues. And so, yeah, that was kind of the catalyst that kind of pushed me into the preconception space. And then when as I started following you and learning more about the fifth vital sign, and then was on your email list and saw that you were running a program, maybe I was the first person, but I jumped on that. I was like, yes, please, I want to do this. I think you had like a question that you had to fill out an application. I remember.
Yeah, I did. I was filling it out last year. So I put out this questionnaire kind of like, if I were to do this thing, would you want to do it? And there was a lot of people who responded. I was okay. I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing the thing.
Yes.
And it was yeah. So that was, you probably had responded to that. And then there was calls and there was things and here we are.
Yeah. Cause it wasn't for a few weeks or a couple months until you actually rolled it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cause I was literally kind of like, I obviously had been thinking about it. So for anyone who doesn't really know, I mean, when I first started this podcast, I had I just didn't even think about that. I was more at the stage of like, I had been charting for at least a decade at that point. I had had my first child and I kind of looked around and was like, wow, I've been doing this for a decade. And most of the women that I know and even to this day, most women still don't really know about their cycles. So I was kind of in that space of like, let me just help the women who need the help. But shortly after, I mean, over the past several years, the most frequent requests that I was getting was from practitioners of how do I do this? I want to do this too. So that's a little bit of background for the listeners. But yeah, I feel like your experience is really interesting. This is one of the reasons why I love charting so much and why I'm probably a broken record about this stuff. But I feel like I often will say, charting is a great equalizer because it really is a vital sign. And so even if you're pretty much good and whatever, it really kind of highlights or at least brings to the top anything that's a little bit off. And from my experience, the things that can be a little off can really screw with your quality of life. So maybe you could share a little bit about, because in your experience, we went through, every practitioner in the program goes through essentially the client process. So you complete your health forms, we go through it together, you chart if you're cycling. And so one of the things that came up, as you had mentioned, was your PMS. And so we had talked about that quite a bit because you had found a way to essentially solve it. But because I always say, there's a lot of, like you were using herbs. And of course, the most common herb for PMS treatment is Vitex, chasteberry, which works. I always say herbs work. Maybe share a little bit about your experience and kind of, I don't know if you had expected to actually go there.
Yeah. So I noticed, it's interesting again, like I love collecting data and going back to this charting, before I get into my experience, I would say now I'm starting to chart with my clients as well. But what I noticed with the charting is it literally like takes the information that you think about yourself to a whole new level. And as I now share with clients and, in my social media, it's like saying, I love being able to gather data about myself every single day that you wouldn't necessarily do or know how to, right? And so to me, I'm a nerd that way. So that's very exciting to me. So as I started collecting this data about myself, I mean, I would say my PMS, other than, in my 20s, again, like I grew up with four brothers. I think I just blamed everything on them with my moodiness. But looking back now, maybe, there was some PMS involved there. But I would say my PMS really started coming on strong in my mid to late 30s. I don't remember it being this bad in my early 30s. And I just thought, to be honest, just doing the research that I did, that's just naturally what happened as our hormones changed. So we moved into our mid to late 30s. And so as I would say for the last 2.5 years or 3 years, my PMS got to a point where I would know that in the last 2 weeks of my cycle, at least almost one of those weeks would be like debilitating. And the PMS would be all consuming and I would be very emotional. I would have such foggy brain. I would get this like terrible anxiety in my chest. And I've never really been an overly anxious person, and I've never really had panic attacks in my life or any of that stuff. I'm a pretty kind of even keeled kind of chill kind of person. But all of a sudden I started experiencing these kind of like anxiety attacks, and I'm like, what is going on with me? And so it wasn't until that I really started working in this program and that I was able to dive into, as I charted my cycle, getting into the nuances about how to support that through specific certain supplements and looking at my temperatures. And they weren't necessarily rising as high as I would have liked them to in the luteal phase of the cycle. And yeah, just, taking some specific measures. Do you want me to share what those are?
Well, sure. I think I just wanted to make a comment because from what I remember, I could pull up your charts, but from what I remember when we were going through your charts, your cycles were pretty consistent and regular. So this is not a situation of this over obvious problem in the cycle. Yeah. But when you're looking at it kind of under a microscope through our client protocols and everything like that, what the concern was for me, of course, was the lower temperatures, but also your symptoms, the PMS symptoms. And I think it was something you had said, because correct me if I'm wrong, but you had experienced these symptoms. They were really debilitating, like you said. And then you started taking a supplement that actually helped a lot. So to me, that's evidence that your progesterone's too low, right? Yeah. Obviously, because you responded really well and made such a big difference. And then you had an interesting situation that happened there. But anyways, that was kind of my, on the side for me, because you, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was kind of like, I've handled this. And for me, I'm kind of like the annoying person in the back saying, have you?
Yes. Yes. No, I love it. That's what I love about you. Because you won't let anything go, and you make sure that everybody, you just know it. That's I think one of the most amazing qualities about you, first off, as a practitioner, because that's what helps people get the results that they need. Right. So, I mean, that's where a coach comes in, and that's what I believe is a big responsibility of the coach that's a big responsibility of the coach. So no, I'm so grateful for that. But you're right. I did take, I would say at the end of last year, before I started working with you, I had, because I was like, this PMS is just killing me. Like, I need to get a handle on this. And I was actually working with my own naturopathic doctor. But at that point in time, because I'm a holistic nutritionist, I'm a practitioner in the space, I'm like, I got this. I can figure this out on my own. But no, we all need coaches. Coaches need coaches. Right. And so I started taking Vitex, but I would say it did take about 2 to 3 months to kick in. And it was a specific combination of Vitex, black cohosh, and ashwagandha. It was called Chestberry Plus. It was a specific kind of proprietary blend from a company called Metagenics that I like to use for supplements for my clients. And I started taking just 2 of those pills in the morning. And it was within 2 to 3 months that I really noticed a big shift. It didn't happen right away. And then that's when I started your program. I think that took me into the earlier part of this year, 2021. And then I went back to my naturopath, shared what I was doing with her. And then she had kind of recommended to kind of tweak the dosage of the Vitex. And she had told me to go up to, I believe it was 1 gram. Was it 1 gram? I think it was a lot. Whatever it was way too much that it was just messing with my head. And I was like, I do not feel right on this. I feel off. And that's, I think, when I had my first call with you, Lisa, as a part of the program. And that's when we were like, well, let's pull back on that. Let's tweak it. And then I kind of went back to the original supplement and like the original proprietary blend that I had talked about. And then in addition to that, working with the B6, the magnesium, and also making sure, for me, one of the biggest things is making sure that I am on top of stabilizing my blood sugar. Because I've got a fast metabolism, and if my blood sugar drops too low, it's game over for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm sure that I would be wondering if I was listening, like, if the Vitex works, then what's the problem? I feel like that's what I would be wondering. And so when we were having these conversations, of course, because I'm thinking of you as a whole person. So I'm thinking of your quality of life, your day-to-day experience, but I'm also thinking of your goals in the future, which are to have a baby at some point. And if you're relying on the Vitex to help you to make the progesterone, from my perspective, from my training and my outlook, I think to myself, well, why are you not making it? And so what I think was interesting in your experience is we kind of had to go through and like look at all these different pieces. And one of the pieces, as you had mentioned earlier in the conversation, was the caffeine. And I feel like I'm on like a caffeine like war tirade or something like that. But I say it with love, because what we ended up discovering, I think it was one of our calls, and I was like, well, are you drinking coffee? Like, are you? And you were like, no, I'm not drinking coffee. And, and then
it was on our group call. It was it was a hot seat on the group call. Yes.
Because we were trying to figure it out. Because basically what I teach in the program is a step-by-step systematic way of analyzing the cycle and to try to figure out those root causes that are causing the problem. So I don't think, oh, Nora just I don't think low progesterone is a personality trait. I don't think, oh, Nora just has low progesterone. Like, no, I think we all have the capability to be healthy. So if you're not showing the signs on the chart of adequate progesterone production, I'm looking at, well, why not? And so we went through everything in the list. We had addressed the eating because you're very active. We had addressed the protein. Like, we had addressed all of these things. And so I think that's when I was like asking these questions, what else is there? What else could there be? And then I'll let you share the story. But essentially we found that there was some caffeine happening, and it potentially was affecting. Well, I think caffeine affects a lot of things. So from my experience, I think it affects our appetite. I think it causes us to eat less during the day. And this is something I've seen a lot with my clients that struggle with progesterone issues. And then there's also adrenal effects from daily caffeine. I think not necessarily caffeine once, but like the habit of caffeine every day for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always prided myself on not being a coffee drinker. Like I didn't grow up drinking coffee. My mom doesn't drink coffee. We're just not coffee people. And so I was like, no, I've never always asked me, do you drink coffee? No, I don't drink coffee. Oh my God, how do you get through your day? Lo and behold, Lisa dug and found out that I was actually taking pre-workout every single morning. That's my little caffeine kick. So about 10 years ago, because I'll be 38 in November. So yeah, I'd say about 10 years ago in my late 20s, I had a very close girlfriend who worked for like a nutritional supplement company. And she had introduced to me this pre-workout. And I had tried it one time and I crushed my workout. For somebody who never had caffeine, all of a sudden, one scoop, 100 milligrams of caffeine. And I just killed my workout. What is this? And so I just started taking it every day as kind of like in the morning to kind of get me going. And I thought, well, this isn't bad. It's yerba mate. It's green tea. There's turmeric in here. It's made with coconut sugar. It was this like nice little blend as opposed to this coffee bean. And so I pretty much got on that routine and did that for 10 years in the morning. And as you were digging on the hot seat and asking, I think it was you said, we laughed about it at the end because you said, I'll always remember to now phrase this question differently. It's, do you drink coffee? And I said, no. And then you're like, wait a minute, do you have caffeine on a daily basis? And then I was like, well, now that's a different answer. And so that's when I was like, okay, I would sometimes do a scoop. Now that I would sometimes do a scoop and a half. And then I'd say maybe once or twice a week, I would run over to the local coffee shop and get myself like a flat white, which is about one shot of coffee. But I think over time, I now know over time that was really affecting me because I've been off of it now, Lisa. I think that hot seat was about 2 months ago. And I've definitely noticed a difference in my energy throughout the day and the quality of my sleep. And also just always trying to improve and optimize my energy as best as I can throughout the day. And I definitely, it's taken my body some time to adjust. And it's a process. Like, I remember when I first stopped drinking coffee, first stopped having my pre-workouts, I was like a zombie for 4 or 5 days. Like, I could not get clear. It was so challenging, like legit withdrawal symptoms. And then I finally got past that hump. I slept like a baby throughout the night. And then I would say my afternoon energy, there would be no afternoon energy dip. But now I'm at a point where I still find that I struggle with energy between like 9 and 11:30 a.m. in the morning. And then after 11:30, it all lifts. So I wonder, could this just be my body like adapting to just being off caffeine and my adrenals just learning how to redo themselves throughout the day?
Yeah, I think so. What I've seen is that when we like, you know how you, like, we all know those women that are like very, very productive and like, but by 8 a.m. they do what you usually do in an entire day. And you kind of are like, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you get through the day? And, a lot, for better or for worse, and in all honesty, a lot of women get through the day with caffeine. And this is how we do it. I especially feel that as we get into, like, I'm also currently 38, I'm turning 39 this year. I feel like at this age, a lot of us, we have our careers, we have family responsibilities, whether or not we have children, we have family responsibilities, we have friends, we have partners. There's just a lot of, and often our, careers are in a different place at this age. So I feel like at this age, there's a lot of demands on our time. And so we get into the habit. So it's interesting because having, some caffeine once in a while is different to having it every single day. And so I think that when we have that caffeine every day to help us get through the day, it can have this effect, because then our adrenals don't necessarily, like, we're not necessarily producing the hormones that we need to feel alert. The coffee is giving us the boost to feel alert. So then it can take some time. So, but with that said, it would be worthwhile to consider, if that doesn't improve over time, you might need a bit of a boost for the adrenals for a period of time. So that might be something to look at. But it's interesting because coffee is just an interesting thing, everyone, and caffeine in general. A lot of us really love our coffee. We love our tea. Yeah. And it's part of the culture. Like, oh, I can't start the day without my coffee. I can't tell you how many. It's just like how it is, whether it's like mom's mugs powered by coffee. And again, it's not even to say there's anything negative about it. I don't attack anyone's coffee if their cycles are great and they're doing well. Really and truly, you had come to me with a challenge, a pretty significant challenge. And so in your case, and so of course this doesn't apply to everybody, right? But in your case, we kind of figured it out that was one of the reasons why your body was struggling so much with the progesterone production, Just jumping into today's episode with some exciting news to share. The Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program, Class of 2022, starts in January. If you've been searching for a practical way to incorporate fertility awareness cycle charting into your existing women's health practice, then this is the program you've been waiting for. The Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship is a 9-month training program that provides the necessary training to incorporate fertility awareness cycle charting into your existing practice. This program cuts out all of the fluff by combining the science with the practical application of charting and allows you to support your clients by monitoring their fifth vital sign in a standardized way. Transform your practice in 9 months. Apply now at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's FAMMLIVE. fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. And the changes that you saw in the changes that you felt, your energy levels in the sleep and everything, is a sign that was kind of, one of the things that was preventing the full normal expression of your hormones. So yeah, thank you for sharing your experience. I feel like this is why I love the menstrual cycle and why I love charting, because for me, from my perspective, when I see these things that are off, I know that there must be a reason. And so that's essentially what I'm teaching all of the ladies in the program, to be more kind of like detectives. And it's coming from a place of, my body is capable of doing this. And so if it's not, then what is the reason why it's not?
Mm-hmm. And to kind of add on to that point, Lisa, I think for me as well, and for listeners, and I think a lot of your listeners and a lot of people who will be listening to the podcast are female, maybe predominantly female, and I'm sure there's some men too, but also maybe in their childbearing years and looking to do the things that they need to do to optimize their body, their health, and fertility. I mean, we can all make improvements in our health. And as somebody in my late 30s, and I'd love to share at some point again, like what my kind of goal is for having children and what that's going to look like for me over the next couple of years. I mean, I also know that fertility naturally does decline as we age. It doesn't mean I can't have healthy, beautiful babies into my early 40s, but it's so important for me right now to do every possible thing that I can to optimize my fertility, because I'm going to be moving into trying to get pregnant in the next year, moving into my, late 30s. I'll be 38. Maybe, I'd love to have 2 kids. So that might push me into my early 40s. I think caffeine is a big variable because even from your book and looking at your research, caffeine does affect fertility. I think there was one study was done by 27%. Oh, I can't remember the exact details now, but Lisa's got her book behind her there.
Well, it's an interesting stat. And I think it's somewhat controversial in the sense that we can't stand here and say if you drink caffeine, you won't be able to get pregnant. That's not what the study said.
No.
But if I remember correctly, the participants were drinking or were taking 300 milligrams of caffeine a day. And so that's the equivalent of basically 2 to 3, depending on how strong your coffee is, pretty good sized cups of coffee, I don't think I'm going to find it. I don't think it matters. But essentially what happened is that the participants who drank that level of coffee had a reduction in their percent chance of conception per cycle. What that means in layman's terms is that if it takes the average couple, 4 months to conceive, the average healthy couple, it would take these women on average longer than that. And I think it was 30%.
I think it was 27 or 30%, something like that. I remember that number. Yeah.
And from from the menstrual cycle perspective, so when I was supporting you, what is going through my mind is that if you need Vitex to make enough progesterone so that you don't have these severe symptoms, because it wasn't mild, it was pretty significant. And so that, to me, that's saying that those supplements are filling a significant gap. Then what happens when you get pregnant? Are you planning? And I probably asked the question, are you planning to take Vitex through the pregnancy? Because you're going to have to support. And then, so in those kinds of cases, you would then have to look at, and you still might, but you would then have to look at getting your progesterone tested mid-luteal. If you conceive, then you get your progesterone tested early on to see if you need to have progesterone replacement therapy or something like that. And that's something that you would potentially that would be kind of a pretty serious thing. Because if all of a sudden you're pregnant and then you quit the Vitex, your body has to figure this out. And it wasn't used to making the normal levels to begin with. So that's where my mind goes with these things. And it's more about optimizing it. And again, coming from that perspective that your body should be able to do it. And I mean, if you had different goals and if you were no, I'm not going to give up my energy drink, then the Vitex might be the perfect solution to fill that gap, in that situation. But obviously your goals were different. But maybe share with us a little bit about your plans and how the program and charting and everything have been helpful.
Yeah. So my plan is, I guess it was about a month ago, it's a big moment for me. I actually ended up buying 5 vials of sperm. So that's exciting. And my goal or my plan is to start trying on my own early next year. So early next year, maybe January, February 2022. So we both live in Canada, and in Canada, actually, I only learned this recently, was that prior to February of 2021 here in Canada, the sperm distribution centers were not allowed to send sperm to your house. They were always just able to send sperm to the clinic. And if you were going to be doing, if you're going to be a single mom by choice and you wanted to get inseminated, if you had a friend and, he could give you his sperm and maybe you could do it at home on your own, that would be your only option. But if you're actually getting it from a sperm bank, you'd have to go to the clinic. And so I thought that was the option for me. But when I had bought the sperm a month and a half ago, I had a wonderful, wonderful human being who assisted me throughout the process, who worked at the sperm bank or distribution center. And she had mentioned that now the opportunity is for them to send me the sperm directly to my house. So she said, you actually can do an at-home insemination, which got me super excited because I was like, well, this is perfect considering what I'm just learning. And so my goal then is to try inseminating myself at home. Now, I'm for sure going to give myself the first opportunity to try and do it at home. I have a little bit of a plan, but I don't know how it's all going to roll out and go. But at least for the first shot, I would love to try an at-home insemination. And as I was sharing with you, Lisa, too, at some point throughout the program, I think we were on our calls, is that the biggest challenge with doing this with a donated sperm is that it comes to me completely frozen. But then obviously it has to thaw. And unlike sperm that you would maybe get from your partner is if you had sex and your cervical mucus would keep that sperm alive for a few days. And, you have a bigger window of opportunity to potentially get pregnant. However, now with the sperm from the sperm bank, I only have a 24-hour window at a shot at fertilizing my egg, because as soon as that sperm thaws, it has 24 hours until it's null and void. So I have to be so precise with figuring out my ovulation when I'm ovulating. And I would say doing your program and learning through cross-checking my basal body temperature and my cervical mucus. And I'm also just started with your guidance, started just using the luteinizing hormone test strips just to gather, again, as much data as I can, cross-check. I'm now kind of working over the next couple of months to really do my best to pinpoint my ovulation window as close as I can so that I can hopefully be successful with doing my at-home insemination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. And there's so many unknowns. So it's exciting, terrifying. It's not free. It's quite expensive. I know you were sharing with me how much it costs to purchase sperm, and it's definitely not free. So then that's a factor as well, because it's not like you have unlimited sperm, unlimited tries, unlimited attempts. You have kind of within what's reasonable in terms of like how to go about it. And I mean, I've spoken about the ovulation strips on the podcast many times. I think a lot of people think I'm like totally anti-tech, and I'm not. I think that all of these tools are really helpful. And particularly when you're doing assisted reproductive technology procedures, whether that be an IUI done, for example, if you're not being stimulated and if you're doing it with your cycle, or if you're doing it in insemination, from my perspective, the best strategy would then be using the mucus and the strips. And that's something that we had spoken about, because I don't think you had started using the strips, but you have a bit of lead time. So I think one of the suggestions that I made was to start using the strips now so that you can kind of see like how far before ovulation does the strip turn positive. And that'll help you in your data gathering to be able to do your best to get it as close as possible. And so for anyone who doesn't know, fresh sperm, when you're having sex with a man, does live up to 5 days. So when you look at the research, I haven't come across a lot of research that would suggest that the sperm live longer than about 5 days. So it's about 5 days, but that's fresh sperm. And so that means you could have sex on, Monday and get pregnant if you ovulate on Friday or Saturday, potentially, because the sperm can actually live that long. But when you're doing, and I think I'll link one of the very few episodes on insemination that I've done. I think there was a couple where we talked about it in a little bit more detail. But yeah, frozen sperm has a very small window. So for you in particular, it's just extremely important to do your very best to get that as close as possible with timing. Whereas in other situations, it's not so dramatic in terms of how much time you have.
Mm-hmm. Especially like with a limited number of vials, right? Or, I mean, I could buy more, but again, it's $1,000. I'm happy to share the price. It's from what I've just bought here from the sperm bank that I got it's $1,000 for a vial of sperm. So it can get up there.
Yeah. Every one try. And that's kind of when we were talking about, it's like it would kind of be like one act. So if you were partnered, then you could potentially have sex a few times during that window. Whereas with literally, like if you're going to use one vial one time, that's the equivalent of having sex that one time. So.
Right. Because you did suggest, I remember you also suggesting or having this as an option to potentially, use 2 vials in one cycle, right? I could do 1 vial on one day and then maybe wait a day or a day and a half and then do another vial to maybe increase my chances of getting that.
Put 2 vials together and like double that. But with the 24-hour window, it doesn't really, I mean, maybe doing like that, like if you were to do the LH timing. So the LH strips, when they work as they should, they turn positive about 24 to 36 hours before ovulation. And so that in and of itself means that if it only lives for 24 hours, but at least it helps you to triangulate. So that's one of the reasons I'm not anti-tech. I think that having all of these options are great. The mucus to tell you when the window is opening, and then the LH strip to tell you when you're closest to ovulation. So we all have our fingers crossed for you, Nora, and we're
Thank you.
all, when you're ready, when the time comes, we're all hoping that you'll just have that magical first time success with your home insemination. And I think this brings me to, so the program has been really interesting, I think, on both a personal and a professional level. So we've delved a lot into the personal and your own personal experience. And again, this is one of the reasons why I love charting, because it's not this theoretical thing. It's this thing that we have to get our feet wet, our hands dirty, and get in there and kind of see also having the experience as the practitioner to also be the patient, I feel gives that empathy that we need. It helps us to understand what it's like to try to make some of these changes. And sometimes to think everything's okay. I've certainly had that experience as well, where I thought everything was great with my cycle. And then one of my instructors pointed out, like, no, your temperatures aren't supposed to be that low. And like, why are your cycles always like 40 days? And I was like, what? They're not, they're what? So
Right?
yes, I think it's a very important part of the learning process when you want to support women with charting when possible. Because some of the ladies in our class are past the cycling ages. But, be that as it may, it's very helpful to go through that process yourself because it teaches you, I think, a few things. There's no perfect. So the goal for you isn't to have a perfect cycle. It's just to figure out what's kind of messing with your cycle so that so that you can work towards getting it to optimal. And optimal is a range. There's no perfect number. Optimal is a range. So I feel like the experience helps you to appreciate that further, and also the power of it. It's when you experience it in your own life, how it can be transformative. I think it's really powerful. So maybe share with us how the program has affected you professionally now that you're going through the practicum part of the program and you've been applying this with clients. Like, what has that been like for you, and how do you think this is going to change your practice?
Absolutely. So as a practitioner, I'd say, as I love data, and I think it's so important as opposed to just, guessing and flying off the seat of your pants and guessing. I love having data. Now, I've also, I don't know if anyone has heard of this. I used to do what's called live blood analysis. I did a certification course many years ago. I guess it was in my early 30s after I graduated nutrition school. And I would, as opposed to sending all my clients to the doctor and saying, just get the test from your doctor and we'll just listen to what they say about what's normal and not normal. It's great to have that data. I always ask for the results, but I would also do the live blood analysis to get more information about what's going on inside their body. Now, I don't do the live blood analysis anymore. My business has moved online, so it's almost impossible to do a live blood analysis with somebody, a client I have in New York. I've got a client in the UK. I've got clients all over the place, but having this charting just is a tool that gives me so much data then to help the client improve their cycle and ultimately get them pregnant. Because at the end of the day, as a preconception health coach, this is specifically all that I do and what I niche in is to help women get pregnant. And, get pregnant naturally is obviously the ultimate goal. Nobody's jumping up and down to go and get IVF cycles done, but sometimes it has to go that way. And so I would say, professionally, I've already started implementing it into my practice and have had a bunch of practicum clients and been playing around with a few friends and working with my own chart myself. But it's a really empowering educational tool that is exciting for me because it allows me to be able to serve my clients in a much better way, I would say. And at the same time, it's also very empowering for the client because the client now begins to learn so much more about their body. Just even now going back to the basics when we're just starting to teach these women about what does a healthy menstrual cycle look like? What is the luteal phase? What is the follicular phase? Do you have cervical mucus? We have to remember that so many women are so not body literate. And it's so important for me to really help educate women about their bodies, understand how it works, and then use that to help them really shift, tweak, and change their lifestyle to help them achieve the goal that they want. So, I'm just as excited as I am now that the program is ending as I was at the very beginning when it started. So, it's been a wonderful, wonderful tool, and it's cool because every month you're learning something new about yourself, and then you can also see the changes that you've implemented, you can see it live. You can see it like roll out live by doing these charts. So and you don't have to rely on a doctor. You don't have to rely on anybody else. And sorry, one last thing, because I can obviously keep going about this, is it helps because I see this time and again in my practice, and I'm sure you do too, Lisa, is that a lot of women don't know how to advocate for their health, and they aren't getting the support that they need from their general practitioners, from their OBGYN, from the fertility clinics. And again, I'm also not anti-tech or anti-doctor or any of it, but it's so important to find that right practitioner who's going to listen to you, who's going to understand your needs and not brush you off and tell you everything is fine when in fact, there are underlying health issues and problems. And so I think charting is going to really help my clients and women in general just kind of take back a little bit more control of their health and their fertility and their reproductive health.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's something about charting your cycles. It's kind of like, I like the iceberg analogy. You come in for what you can get out of it. People jump into charting because maybe they want birth control or they want conception. They want to optimize their chances of having a baby. So it's very kind of goal oriented. But as you learn about your body and as you start to see that if I do this, it has this effect on my cycle. I mean, it's very powerful. It goes beyond all the listening to all of the episodes. Like if you have an issue with your cycle, so in your example, it was like the PMS, and you make and often it's like simple but not easy, right? So you make these changes that, looking back, you could have been like, well, I should have known that. But like you said, we all need right? Because we could all beat ourselves up, but all of us need to have kind of the shepherds that help to, right? It's like being around wise women kind of thing who've been there and done that.
Yes.
But either way, when you have that experience then of you having this problem, and you had this problem for a long time, you went to practitioners, you went for help, to find help with this and support with it. But to see that you can make certain changes to improve it, that it can make a significant change in your cycle. When you have struggled with, short luteal phases or whatever, like I'm just giving general examples, and you can actually make certain changes and see that it's improved, then when you go to that doctor with that problem that you have, and the doctor says, oh, well, that's impossible, or that's not a real problem, or you must be imagining it, or no, vitamins don't do anything, then you've had the actual experience. You not only had the experience, we have documentation of the changes that you made and the effects that changed. So I feel like, yes, like when women chart their cycles and are kind of welcomed into this new way of looking at your body, then you end up being more confident in your own observations and your body's ability to kind of rebound and recover. And I feel like no one could tell me anything. Like if I went to a practitioner and they said, oh no, I can't even think of an example, but like eating liver wouldn't do anything, like, whatever, like if they, whatever it is that they said, I can't even, like, I have the evidence myself. I've had the personal experience. In my case, I've had, hundreds of clients. So you can't really tell me anything. And that means that if you're not up to snuff with your helping me, then I'm walking out and I'm finding someone who will help me, who will listen to me, who will take me seriously. Right? Like, so I think it's easy to underestimate how powerful it is, because it's interesting. I think someone who, for example, if this was the first episode they ever listened to, I could see someone being like, well, how can charting your cycle, like, why would that make a difference in advocating for yourself? Like, you're just writing stuff down.
Oh, no, you learn lots. I mean, if you're working with, I think it's important to find and work with that right practitioner, because I think charting on your own without having any kind of knowledge, like without having been taught or doing enough research on how to do it properly, compared to learning how to chart from a trained professional and doing it the way that, we've been taught and learned, is going to give you a much different experience and a different result. In my opinion, I think there's no way, Lisa, that I would get as much information and as much value out of charting if I did not do this with the group. Like whether I did this with you, if I hired you as a coach, or if I went through this program, there is no way that I would have gotten what I had got from this if I did it on my own. So 100%, I can fully attest to that as well.
Well, that's a good point too, because there's more to it that, like, I think what I was hoping with because it's hard to explain, like it's hard to, it's hard to explain what it really involves, because I think on the surface, it's like, well, it's just mucus and temperature, but it's this whole thing. So, rest assured, it's its own silo, this whole charting thing, it's its own specialization, it's its own field, because it's a biomarker that you can actually use, like you said, in real time in your practice to gauge the progress that your clients are making towards their goals by watching and monitoring how their cycles change from, month to month. And so, yeah, it's its own thing, and it's just that powerful. And so I'm excited to see where you take this in your practice. And so one of the questions that I thought I would ask, because I think I would like to think that everyone got more than they bargained for. And so it's kind of like, and here's this giant thing for you to offer to your clients. Here's this giant thing of, how you can teach them to chart, and then how you can utilize the menstrual cycle as a menstrual sign, utilize the menstrual cycle as a vital sign, and all of those things. So maybe share how you've been able to, like, even just a little soundbite, but how you've been able to incorporate it into your practice.
Yeah, I will say I think, Lisa, we talked about this at some point in the program, how I guess us type A women as practitioners naturally tend to attract type A clients. I think majority of us in the program are very like-minded that way. But I will say, I also pride myself on being very organized and have all my files and my forms. But I was so grateful, Lisa, that you had shared a lot of your forms and the way that you run your practice with your clients. And so other than obviously all the tools and learnings that I now have from the program to teach women how to chart their cycle, as a practitioner, you've also helped and given all of us, not just me, but really given all of us so many great tools and resources on the practitioner side to be able to keep us organized. Also, that takes off hours and hours of work on our plate. So grateful for you, Lisa. Thank you for sharing your resources and your tools with us. But you've got some great tools with your intake form. Also, I love the way you put together when we work through the client process with the client, and how we gather and collect all the data and then organize it, right? Like I'm going through my last, in 2 days, it's due. It will be there in 2 days, but we've got our personal charting assignment due on September 30th, and I'm almost finished, but I have to pretty much evaluate my own chart, my own cycle. And I'm doing that big review table where it's like, we have cycle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then pre-ovulatory phase. What was the temp shift? What was the cervical mucus like? How many days was the menstrual cycle? And I've literally plotted my menstrual cycle, like half a year of my menstrual cycle's data on this 1-pager chart, which to me is so cool to see, because, you now get this like bird's eye view snapshot. But my point here that I want to drive home is you being so gracious and kind to share all of those tools and resources for us, because it really has made, I think, the process and the learning, because there is a huge learning curve here, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that it hasn't been uncomfortable at times where I'm like, this is overwhelming, but Lisa's always available. She always gets back to us immediately. And providing us with these organized kind of forms and tools so that we can kind of really stay focused on the goal and the learning component of what we're doing, and then have these tools to kind of help us make sure that that we're successful, as we roll this out to our own clients. So that was a big thing that I was super, super grateful for.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. It's fun to see everything come full circle. Well, and share a little bit about so for all the listeners then who want to learn more about you and what you do, share a little bit about your own practice and where you are and all the places. So your website and your socials. And I know you have a program coming up. So tell us about all the things.
Yeah. So my website, or where do I want to start? Let's start with, so I'm a preconception health coach, and I essentially help women prepare their body for pregnancy to help them have a healthy baby after 30. And I do this through my 3-month program. I have a 3-month program, which sometimes extends quite a bit longer than that based on just every individual's needs. But it's called Master Your Cycle to Get Pregnant. And I'm now implementing the charting, nutrition, and self-care practices to really help women master their cycle, to help them conceive naturally. And yeah, I've got a live workshop that's coming up called the Eat to Get Pregnant workshop, which teaches you about my 4R method with regards to nutrition and how to optimize fertility. And you can find more information about that on my website at www.naturallynora.ca. So it's naturally, and then my name, Nora, there's no H at the end, .ca, because I am Canadian, so it's not .com. And also you can find me on Instagram at naturally_Nora. And I post daily, lots of education tips, inspirational quotes, and all that wonderful good stuff to help you just learn about how to best prepare your body for pregnancy.
Amazing. Well, I will make sure to put all of those links in the show notes page for the listeners who are on the go. Nora, we could have talked for the rest of the day. This was so much fun.
I know.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so nice to have this opportunity to kind of delve into your story a little bit more. I feel like I learned a little bit more about your personal story, even from what I knew from having you in the program for 6 months. So thank you just for sharing your story so honestly and openly. And I just really excited to share this episode with the audience.
Thank you, Lisa, so much for having me. And thank you for creating this practitioner program. I'm so grateful for it. So thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/393. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Nora. I just want to thank Nora again for coming on the show and sharing her experience so candidly and openly. It was such a treat having her in the program and to just be right there with her as she was seeing these different changes in her cycle and really diving into that. I think that's what makes this work so unique and so special, that you can have hundreds of clients over your career or thousands of clients depending on what you do, but no two women are essentially the same. You know, there's certain general tenets that you unify. So we're all humans. So, you know, there are certain basic tenets, what I call foundational factors that everyone needs to pay attention to. But ultimately, even if you have a certain way that you work with clients or a certain process that you take clients through, what cycle charting adds to the conversation is you get to see this personalized record of how those changes are affecting that particular client. And what you learn as you incorporate this into your practice is that sometimes you'll have 3 different clients or 5 different clients presenting with very similar situations, but the same intervention will not affect each client in the same way. And so when you track the cycle, you actually can see for yourself how effective certain approaches are with some clients, but not others. And so it really forces you to adapt to what's happening with that individual person. And also, if you have a hunch of, okay, this is what I think is going to work, if you don't see those changes and results in the cycle that you're looking for, then it really does force you to look deeper and to adapt your approach to that specific person and what's really going to move the needle for her. So that and so much more is what the FAMM program is essentially all about. For details about the program, you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. And I just want to thank you for tuning into the show, for spending some time with us today. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.